You can stay if you don't eat. 1. Snow is white and white is clean. They both needed that, to be clean or to get cleaner, also to push their bodies. They did this regularly whenever they could get enough days to hike, to get lost. Not truly lost, just lost enough to get lost from the real world. Most people need this. It's why they binge TV series or read books. The longer, the better. People need to get really lost. A movie isn't long enough anymore. It seems like life is moving into the mind. More and more of it is lived in the head, not in the body. Surfing, chatting, working, building another world from pixels and vectors. The outside world is uncomfortable. You can't control it. Heat, snow, rain, other people doing stupid things in traffic. And just other people with agendas different than yours. The world of the mind is totally self-contained. Everyone has their own world, constantly being updated to keep them comfortable. Comfortable enough to keep scrolling, comfortable enough to feed it. Both of them actually felt a bit like rebels when they went out, using their muscles, sweating, being humbled by the weather, just for using their bodies the way they were meant to be used. 2. Technically, they weren't supposed to be this high, not in November, not with the snow falling early, not with the last village 2 days behind them, and no one knowing they'd come this far. But this was Bulgaria, and life worked differently than in the West. There was less hand-holding, less government oversight, no park rangers. You were allowed to just leave your house, park your car at the edge of the road and walk off into the woods. Not on marked trails with concrete bridges and pipe handrails crossing every stream that earned one. Just hike, into the wild, real freedom. The kind where you could believe you were the only ones to ever walk this land. And you'd be partly right. Because maybe you were at least the only ones to do it in a very long time. The earth was rapidly shrinking to the size of your house, or your apartment, your shared flat, or just your computer table, which often doubled as your bed. 3. The snow, the nature, the aloneness. They scrubbed that old world off for a while, but both of them knew it was waiting. And they would return to it. You had to. It was the umbilical cord no one could cut. This time, they were following a loose trail that Layla had shown Luca. She'd gotten the folded map, along with many others, as part of her grandmother's things. A time when more people had taken to the mountains unashamed of using their bodies. The lung of the earth, it said in Cyrillic. Just a curve drawn into white, ending in nothing. Just one more valley, she told him. If we don't find anything, we'll make camp. They had already been to 5 other places over the last few days. She'd gotten recordings of floorboards moaning in a century-old house in Koprivshtitsa, wild dogs howling at a passing train, sheep bells in mist, wind that echoed in a dry cave mouth like a throat trying to speak. She used an expensive handheld recorder to capture nature sounds, or random sounds. She'd clean them up and then put them online. Other people would pay for them and they'd be used in movies, videos, or commercials. She'd been doing it since she was 13. Her father showed her, but back then he did it for fun, with cassette tapes. Now it was business. He had sketched roofs, doorways, faces on crumbling posters, a defaced statue with lilies at its feet. At the monastery, an old man touched Luca's wrist and muttered something in Church Slavonic. Luca wrote it down and never spoke of it. They had eaten lukewarm stew, camped beside rivers turned to black ice, dried their socks by fires, and listened to Layla's playback through top-end headphones. Silence, broken by frost crack and distant owl. Life was good, really good, if you could walk your own path. 4. And now they were climbing again. It was an old map, but geography isn't quick to change. The map app had given up miles ago. They weren't lost exactly, but the path had narrowed into something not built for hikers. A goat trail, if anything. Wind-bent trees reached from the cliffs like people frozen mid-fall. The sky had been the colour of unwashed wool since dawn, and by midday the snow began. Not heavy, but steady, dry. Enough to sting when the gusts came. They didn't speak much. Layla was listening for sound pockets. Luca was trying not to think too hard about the route, about the word Layla's grandmother had used when describing this path, lungs. His were working hard now, both of them breathing heavily. It felt like they were inside a crease. Then, just before the ridge, the wind died, not slowed, stopped. Layla paused first. Her breath steamed in the air like her mouth was making soup. "I think we just stepped out of the snow," she said. Luca turned. Behind them, flakes still falling, curtain-like. Ahead, no wind, no snow, just air, open and still. The sky had turned faintly yellow. They walked 5 more minutes. The incline flattened, then dipped, and just below a stretch of green, not lush, not springtime, but soft moss. Grass pushing through hoarfrost. A valley floor that shouldn't be there. A river too unfrozen, cutting through the rocks in perfect silence. Layla lifted her mic. "I don't hear anything," she whispered. Luca didn't answer. He had already stepped forward. The valley they descended into didn't make sense. They had just climbed into heavier snow, thinner air, and wind that punished the lungs. But now the slope softened, and the cold bled away as if it had been switched off. They walked down into green. The sun hadn't come out exactly. It was just lighter here, as if the air itself had begun to glow. Their boots sank into moss that looked soft but felt dry. Each step pressed a faint pattern but made no sound. Layla stopped. "Listen." Luca froze. No wind, no birds, no insects, nothing. She tapped her recorder. The red light blinked. Alive. The gear was fine, but the world was mute. The river appeared first, a clear, narrow ribbon cutting through the moss. It wasn't frozen. It wasn't even cold. Luca got down on his knees and dipped a hand in. It was room temperature, clean as glass. The water made no noise as it moved, only a faint vibration, like a hum you could feel in your ribs. A bridge crossed it, wooden, hand-carved, no handrails, no bolts or nails. The planks looked grown, not built. The edges were too smooth, the grain too fluid. When they stepped onto it, the surface flexed slightly, as if it bent under their weight. They stepped off the other side of the bridge, and the moment their boots touched the mossy ground, sound returned. Not suddenly, but like fog rising, first a hiss, then a whisper, then a warm thrum in the air. It wasn't right, though. The birdsong came in short loops, like a scratched vinyl record repeating the same warble every 7 seconds. The river below them whispered, but without water, like someone rustling a silk sheet. And the crickets were there too, chirping softly in the brush, but the chirps seemed off-tune to her ear. When she turned toward the sound, it vanished, then started again behind her. Layla pulled the little black recorder from her coat pocket. She pressed the button. The red light blinked. She held it up to the trees, then down to the stream, then just to the air between them. The forest sounded hollow through the machine, like someone had placed a blanket over the world. Voices of birds muffled in wool, crickets ticking from a long hallway. She frowned and scanned the trees. Nothing moved. No birds on branches, no insects in the grass, no wings, no leaves, no shimmer of eyes. But the sounds were all around them, clear and distant at the same time. "They're not here," she said. He nodded slowly. "But we hear them." She stopped the recording, listened again. A single bird called out, 3 notes, and then again, then silent. 5. They got up and followed the path from the bridge as it curved around the bend of the river, through a cluster of silvered trees whose branches bent like ribs. And then they saw it. A village. Not big. A few dozen houses scattered across the slope like seeds tossed by hand. No fences, no straight lines, just space between them, as if they'd grown apart on purpose. The houses were small, blue, pink, or left natural, planks of wood with paint peeling, trim white and ornate, shutters shaped like teardrops and waves. Some were 2 stories, others squat and low, the roofs uneven, bowed slightly from age. But the wood wasn't rotten. Everything looked perfect in its ruin, impossibly preserved. Smoke rose from a few chimneys. Laundry hung frozen mid-sway, as if it had forgotten to finish the motion. In one upper window, a silhouette stood still behind the glass. Not moving, just watching. The light behind it was soft, yellow, like lamplight under water, but no voices, no barking dogs, no chopping of wood. Layla whispered, "Are they even alive?" Luca didn't answer. They moved down the dirt path that wound between the houses. The air was warmer and the ground dry. Layla lifted her mic again. Finally, she heard something faint. A bird. A soft, repeating call. She stopped, scanning the trees. The sound looped exactly. No breaks, no variation. She crouched, looking for the cricket she swore she heard. Nothing, not even movement in the grass. "They're there," she said. "But not." "Or they're watching us," he murmured. They reached an open space, something like a town square, if it could be called that. A dry well stood in the middle, ringed by flat stones. 2 long benches faced the houses. Layla sat first, pulling off her boots. Her feet steamed faintly in the still air. She peeled off her socks and laid them across her knees to dry. Luca sat beside her, opened his sketchbook and began to draw the shutters, the carved tulips, the hearts, the perfect symmetry of them. Neither spoke for a while. They weren't awestruck, just confused, like tourists who had walked into a memory that didn't belong to them. Then someone appeared. 6. A child stood at the far edge of the square, barefoot, skin pale blue like the houses. Her hair was in loose braids. She stared at them for a long moment, then lifted a hand in a slow wave. Before either of them could speak, she turned and walked away, vanishing between 2 houses. Luca and Layla looked at each other. "She wants us to follow," Layla said. Uncertain, they did. If only to see where she went and if there were more people. The path wound behind the houses to a low, wide building with no windows on the side facing them. The roof sagged slightly and pale smoke curled from a hole instead of a chimney. The child was gone. An older woman stood in the doorway. She didn't speak. She only nodded once, then gestured inside. The air was warm. There were 2 beds, a table, and a fire burning in a stone pit. The walls were bare except for one thing, a glass bell on the table, covering what looked like a stack of parchment. 2 cups of water waited beside it, filled to the rim. A bucket for more sat nearby. Luca set down his pack. Layla stood by the fire, rubbing her hands. When Luca lifted the bell, a small breath of air escaped. It felt like whatever was inside had been holding it for too long. It wasn't paper. It wasn't parchment either. The surface was fibrous, almost translucent, like stretched skin or layered bark. The edges curled slightly, and the ink was brown, not black. He read the first line. Solène Dupri, 1857. He turned another page. The next was older, written in a language he didn't recognize. Then one older still, with symbols cut into the surface instead of ink. He flipped farther. The writing became less and less human. One entry was signed with a single spiral. Another looked pressed in by fingertips instead of written. At the back, one page was blank. Its texture was smoother than the rest, as if waiting for something. Layla came over. "How far does it go?" "Farther than paper," Luca said, laughing softly. She moved to the window. Outside, just beyond the last house, she saw a tree standing alone on the hill. Its trunk gleamed silver, like wet metal. Its branches moved slightly, though there was no wind. And on them, fruit. Round, translucent, faintly glowing. The fruit pulsed, softly, like breathing. Layla's hand tightened on the windowsill. Her reflection in the glass looked pale, stretched, wrong. Luca stepped beside her, following her gaze. "This is weird," he whispered. She nodded slowly. "It's wrong," she said. Outside the light dimmed, though the sky didn't change colour. No sunset, no shift of shadow. Just an evening that arrived without moving the light. She turned to get them some food from the packs, but they were gone. The floor where they'd been was empty. She looked behind the beds, under the table, checked the corners. Nothing. She stepped outside, no sign of them on the porch. She tried the other door, just a short hallway leading out the back. No packs there either. She stood still for a moment. "Maybe they put them somewhere," she said. "A custom?" Luca didn't reply. He was still at the window, watching the tree. She rubbed her hands together again. It felt colder now without the fire. "Tomorrow," she said, more to herself than to him. "We have to find food, even if we have to barge into one of their houses and steal it. And we need to find our backpacks." Luca turned slowly. "They were just here." "I know." Something creaked overhead, but when she looked up, there was no second floor. 7. He didn't wake with a start. It was the sound that did it. The door opening. Not loud, just the soft hitch of wood over stone. Luca stirred, turned toward it. Layla was already outside, walking up the hill alone. Her boots whispered against the moss. She wasn't in a hurry. He sat up, he rubbed his eyes, pulled on his coat. There was no panic in him yet, just a quiet sense that he should go. The air was dim, like it always was here. The sky didn't have a sun, not exactly, just a kind of ambient light that swelled or faded without direction. It could have been dawn, it could have been dusk. He followed her up to the orchard. The trees stood in their perfect rows, silver-limbed and strange. Frost clung to the branches even though the air was warm. A few villagers were tending them, already brushing off the frost with carved tools, lighting small fires near the roots. They didn't speak, they didn't glance at the newcomers. Layla stood at the edge of the trees, breathing softly and looking intensely at the fruit. Luca caught up beside her. "I don't think we should eat anything," he said. "I know," she replied. They watched a child up ahead pluck one of the fruits. The fruit gave a soft chime, like a porcelain bell. The child bit in, juice slid down his chin. He smiled. Layla reached out slowly and picked one. It rang. "It's heavier than I thought," she said. "It feels warm, like flesh." He didn't answer. She turned it in her hand and held it out to him. "You want to try?" He shook his head. "Don't." "But I'm so hungry," she said. She looked furtively around at Luca, at the village, then raised it to her mouth and bit. She made a small sound, not a scream, exactly, more like surprise or pain that caught in her throat. He turned. The fruit slipped from her hand. She was gone. Ate. Not vanished in front of him. Just not there. He looked around quickly, eyes trying to be everywhere at once, hands outstretched, palms open like he had just dropped something. The villagers grooming the trees looked up but kept working. They watched from the corners of their eyes, waiting to see how he'd react. He stepped forward. There were a few drops of blood in the moss where she had been standing. She wasn't invisible. She really just wasn't there. He should have panicked, should have screamed her name, but he didn't. Even though he felt shock, the shock felt dulled, comfortable, slow. She just disappeared, his mind said, echoing in slow motion. Instead of calling for her, he backed away. After a few moments, he walked down the row and found one of the older girls tending a tree alone. Not the child he'd seen before. Maybe her sister. Her hands were steady. Her skin had the same pale blue cast. He stood there for a long time. Eventually, she looked at him. Her expression didn't change. She sat down on the ground and gestured beside her. He sat. They stayed like that for a while, watching the orchard. The bells rang faintly each time a fruit was picked. He asked where Layla went. Her mouth shaped shy, quietly defiant words. "She ate," she said, her left shoulder lifted in a small shrug. He asked what that meant. She thought for a moment, then said, "Exiled." "She ate, and that's forbidden for you. You stay hungry, pure for who? For you, outsiders." Her words came like something memorized long ago. Simple, flat, but not unkind. More like reciting the rules to a game. There was something about her, a smell like cold mint and wood smoke, a steadiness that made his stomach ache. She stayed beside him in silence. He watched her work, scraping soot from the bark, braiding long grass into loops of rope to circle the tree. He kept glancing at her, the smooth skin of her face, the clean simplicity of her features, her eyes, wide and unblinking. He didn't know why he did it, but he leaned forward and kissed her. It wasn't sudden, it wasn't soft, just a press of lips. Something inside him said now, and he obeyed it. She didn't flinch. She kissed him back. Her mouth tasted so bitter, worse than anything he had imagined, like pine sap, burnt ash, mold, copper. He pulled away, eyes watering. She only smiled just a little, then stood and walked swiftly away. Luca went down to the river and scooped water into his mouth. Have they been drugging the water, he thought? He searched the square, checked behind the houses, called Layla's name once softly. He did not find her. The light dimmed. After a while, the doors closed. Smoke curled up from the chimneys. It felt like night. He returned to the guest house. His stomach ached. He tried not to think about the taste on his lips. Then he lay down in the dark and tried to sleep. 9. He woke again in the empty little house with the shallow door and the grey light. But he had the uncanny feeling it wasn't for the first time. Maybe he thought she'd come back. Maybe he thought something would open, or maybe he was a little drugged, he thought again. This should matter. Watching your partner vanish in front of you, leaving only a few drops of blood, and somehow not panicking, somehow feeling your thoughts glaze over and spread thin. Was it the air, the birdsong, time passed, or what felt like time? It was hard to tell here. The sky didn't change. The sun rose, maybe, but never appeared. The clouds just glowed faintly, always in the same way. He sketched. He sketched the rooftops, the stilts under the porches, the bare trees. He sketched the girl he kissed, the orchard from memory, the strangers in the square. Sometimes he walked beside her again, the older girl. She didn't speak. If he held her hand, wherever their skin touched began to itch. Sometimes the younger girl followed him, jumping on his shadow. The sister would watch him quietly, sometimes humming under her breath, sometimes smiling when she caught him staring. He grew hungrier. There was no food, no shops, no meals. No one seemed to eat at all except the children in the orchard, their mouths stained, fruit in their hands. He tried to forget the sound Layla made, that soft, startled gasp before she vanished. But the hunger kept building. It hollowed him out, made his fingers shake, made him feel like the firewood the old man had split, dry and waiting to burn. On the 3rd morning, or maybe the 5th, he walked alone to the orchard. He didn't think, he just went. The trees greeted him with silence. He breathed in the scent of the fruit, something golden and warm, like honey and stone, like skin, or soft bread. He reached out and touched one. It rang, a quiet chime, delicate and clear. He turned it in his hand. It was smooth as bone. There was a soft place near the stem. He wondered if he ate this, could he stay? Would the girl stop tasting bitter? He plucked it, put it to his lips, warm, opened his mouth and bit down. The fruit shattered. It wasn't soft. It was thin glass, thinner than eggshell, filled with something sweet and sharp. It sliced his tongue, his gums, his lip. He gasped, dropped to one knee, spat blood and pulp into the dirt. 10. The orchard left. Then the world. 11. It was bright. He blinked. He was sitting in snow. Real snow, soft, cold, silent. And red. He pulled the rest of the glass from his mouth, then looked around. The sky was pale blue now, the light clean and sharp. The trees were thin and bare, his coat was zipped. His pack lay a few meters away. He wiped his mouth, blood on his glove, a lot of it. "Layla!" he called out. A voice answered nearby. He scrambled over a low rise and saw her, sitting on a rock, rubbing her mouth. Red smeared her chin and sleeve. They looked like vampires. She looked up. "You too?" she said. He nodded. "How long have you been out?" She shook her head. "Just now, I just got here. I thought you followed me 2 minutes ago." "No," he said, glancing around. "It's been like 4 days." She looked up sharply and gave him a puzzled look. He sat down beside her. They didn't speak for a while, just looked at each other, spit out small sprays of blood in the snow. Eventually, they stood. 12. They walked for the better part of 2 days. The cold felt colder this time. Once you've felt warmth, the cold always does. Back down the mountain. They camped and walked again, not even bothering to heat up their cans of food, just running through it. Cold. The second night in the tent, they would start to discuss it, then stop, look at each other and look away. It was a descent made haphazardly, unsafely, not following the map, but just following their inner compasses. Really, they were just trying to go down rather than follow the trail. Until, at the edge of the valley, they came to a small town. They found an inn. Wooden sign, slanted porch, door that creaked. Inside, they were surrounded by pink people speaking their language. Sat at a table and ordered soup. The bread was stale but warm. They didn't talk much, just ate slowly, watching the steam rise. The man behind the counter watched them too. After the food, they began to drink. You think you need food, until you have food, and then you need drink. Then the drink needs a drink. At the bar, the bartender came over to refill their pints. He looked at the cuts on their lips. "You saw them?" he said. The man scratched his chin. "The ones that walk. The gasenichni." He scratched his chin again. "Means caterpillar people. You know, because the village moves. Thousands of feet, all small, all human. No one's seen it move, but it does." Layla frowned. "What do you mean?" He leaned on the table. "The village with no name. No road in, no road out. Every now and then people wander in, on accident. They say can stay as long as you don't eat. But if you eat," he tapped his temple, "you get thrown out, can't ever find it again. And everyone has those same cuts on their lips." He poured them another glass of beer, then left them alone. They drank in silence. The beer wasn't bitter, it was sweet. But it was missing something. They stayed the night upstairs in a room with wallpaper the colour of bones. Slept in separate beds, but not far. In the morning they packed quietly and let that umbilical cord effortlessly pull them home. 13. That's the difference. The world everyone built for themselves. On screens, in safe rooms, temperature controlled, food delivered. And the real world. Still unknown, still wild. Still dangerous. Was it true or just a well-told lie? Tell us what you believe and why. We know many of you listen late at night, sometimes while drifting off to sleep. Maybe you're wrapped in polar bear blankets, deep in the Arctic dark. Maybe you're swinging in a jungle hammock, wrapped up like a snack. Or maybe you're alone in a quiet room, or so you think. Let us know where you're listening from, and whether this story kept you awake, or gave you good dreams. And one more thing. If you know a rare or hidden place, A ruin, an old legend, a forgotten town, share it in the comments. Your suggestion might become part of the Atlas. If you enjoyed wandering these forgotten corners, subscribe and join us again for another journey into the unknown.